Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna sayyidina wa sanadina wa shafi'ana Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu amma ba'd. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وارحم على عبدك ورسولك سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وسلم تسليما. Alhamdulillah, we are coming very, very fast approaching the middle of the month of Ramadan, and normally this happens when something is almost half done or you're halfway through. Sometimes people have a little bit of a slump, and this is the time when many people have a bit of a Ramadan slump. The cumulative effect of fasting and hunger and thirst starts to kick in. The weariness starts to kick in. Alhamdulillah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send us inshallah into the last 10 days, and the last 10 days and nights then everybody picks up again and comes closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gets another jump, and then of course the next slump will come after on Eid, and then that's the real challenge, to pick oneself up after Eid inshallah. So there's another aspect of purification of the heart that we talk about relatively less, and I thought it was a bit relevant to what is going on in the world in that sense, and that is, and it's a very intense topic, and it's easy definitely to talk about. I know we claim to myself have been able to practice everything I'm going to say tonight, or generally any night, but especially tonight, and that is that, alhamdulillah, mashallah, the early mu'mineen, they were ready for death. You know, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he explained this in hadith this way, istidad al-mawti qabla nuzuleha, that a person is prepared for death before death comes, before death descends upon them, right? And when we're not prepared for death, or we're averse to death, or we're scared of dying, or we're anxious of dying, that also can be some level of impurity of the heart, right? So remember that purity of the heart isn't just purification of those major sins, right? Lust, anger, greed, envy, pride. Purification or tazkiyah goes much deeper than that. So we're trying to go deeper this year in the series and look at different aspects beyond just eliminating those 5 sinful attributes. Because when you think about it, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this duty and role to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa yuzakkihim, and that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will do tazkiyah of the Sahaba, so that means the label of all the tarbiyah, all of the training, guidance, advice, counseling, exhortation that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did to the Sahaba for 20 plus years, all of that collectively and combined is going to be called tazkiyah. So to reduce all of that to simply ridding ourselves of 5 no doubt major sins, which is a major task in itself, but still that would not accurately capture what the teachings of tazkiyah are. Rather, what sometimes we need to do is think that what was the transformation that took place in this very special generation of humanity known as Sahaba Kiram radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajmain. What was a radical change in their humanity, right? And one radical change is that they were ready for death. They anticipated death. They were in expectation of death. You could almost say that they were yearning for death, right? And this is why Arab poets would say things in poetry such as al-mautu jasarun yusil al-habib il-al-habib, that death is but a bridge that unites one lover with another, or unites a lover with their beloved. And the illness in the heart, so it's not necessarily a sin, but the lack of this level of purity. So let's say a partial purity, lack of full purity of the heart, is that we're a little bit wary of death. And obviously now in the global current situation of whatever COVID-19, we can see that everywhere. We can see that with many of us also. We can give reasons for that. Okay, if I die, what would happen to my wife? What would happen to my children? There are many rational reasons we have. There are many emotional reasons we have. But this is this notion that when the heart is truly purified, the spiritual imperatives overrule and override the rational and emotional imperatives that a person indeed has. And the spiritual imperative is that if a person can die in a state that Allah Ta'ala is pleased with them, then there's nothing better than that in the world. And if a person could somehow know that, then they would like to die right now, irrespective of any rational or emotional considerations. So the most intense example of this is obviously Hakiki Shahada. In other words, to truly offer your life, physical life, for the sake of deen, to voluntarily risk your life for the sake of deen, and to lose your life in the path and the cause of deen, to be a true martyr. At the same time, I think as all of us know, especially because of current events, that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam in many ahadith mentioned that beyond the actual true literal martyr, there are many other ways of dying, many other forms of death, which will give a person the hukam or the status of a shaheed and martyr on the Day of Judgment. And one of those, if a person dies of a sudden illness, but me and you, we don't want to die of a sudden illness, right? Now, if the spiritual imperative was the strongest, we would say, okay, if I die of a sudden illness, I'll become a shaheed, right? And if I have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, obviously we would trust and rely and depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if He bestows on someone the rank of being a shaheed, then surely He will be the wali and wakil and kafil. He will be the protector and guardian and hafiz and, preserver, and He would suffice for any loved ones that person may leave behind. But the reality is that this is not the condition of our heart, right? The condition of our heart is that we would even turn away from such a death were it to present itself. In fact, some of us may even flee from such a death if such a death were to present itself. Now, so this is a little bit different. I'm not talking about when somebody turns 70 or 80 years old and they want to stay young, they want to live forever, and then people say, look at this person, don't they realize everybody's going to die? Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Now I'm talking about people, let's say us, who are in 30s and 40s, right? And anybody, in a range below the natural life expectancy. So we're so drilled, this WHO or whatever statistic average life expectancy, the age, is so drilled in us that none of us would want to die beforehand, even if it was a death which has been mentioned in hadith of being a shaheed. So for example, let's say somebody's 40 years old and they're going on Hajj, and you tell them, okay, you're going to pass away on Hajj, what do you think? And they'll say, no, I have to get back, I'm 40, I have this, I have that to do, I have things left in my life, or again, my wife, my children, or my husband, my children, etc., my parents. There could be so many reasons. So this is, again, like I'm saying, at a rational level, emotional level, this is understandable. But it's still worthwhile for us to reflect that there is a certain level that a human being can reach, which was the level that Sahaba Kiram radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajmain reached, that they weren't like this. And they were ready to die in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, let alone what there was their average life expectancy, as mentioned in hadith, let alone in their 60s, right? Now, there could be, the ulama have mentioned a good reason where a person may not want to die just yet if they feel that, no, I haven't made tawbah enough, or I haven't prepared for death enough, I haven't made enough a'mal saleh, righteous deeds, virtuous actions enough. I won't succeed on the day of judgment if I pass away today. Almost like somebody's preparing for an exam and they say, no, I don't want that. I'm not ready for the exam yet. I need more time. But what they mean is, I need more time to study. I need more time to prepare. And if I were to get more time, I would spend all of that more time studying and preparing. So if somebody takes that attitude towards life, right? And that's something really, I think those of us who cross 40, because of the hadith that Sayyidina Rasulullah has mentioned about this age of 40, and even this age of 40 is mentioned in Quran al-Kareem, this is the way our approach to life should be. That actually now that I've hit 40 or crossed 40, I should be ready to die. I should be happy to die. I should be prepared to die. But the only reason that would be acceptable for me to want to live is that I need more time to prepare for the exam on the Day of Judgment. And the only reason worth it for me to keep living is I'm going to spend the rest of my life then preparing for that exam. Otherwise, I should be ready. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Now, again, like I said, this is easy to say. It's very hard to have this level of preparation for death. And what we were doing yesterday that came up a lot in tafsir and comes a lot in Quran al-Kareem is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about people who want to meet Him. Man kana yarju liqa Allah, that person who always is hopeful to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's two meanings. One means that they're always in anticipation of that meeting. They're always in expectation of that meeting. They're always in preparation of that meeting. And the second meaning is that they generally hope and desire and wish to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a phrase Allah ta'ala has used, maybe in slightly different grammatical variations, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used many, many times in Quran al-Kareem. And so it's to express this feeling that a person wants to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or let's look at the hadith of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in which he said, "Ad-dunya'u sidnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir," that the world is a prison, is a cage for the believer, and it is a paradise for the one who denies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so obviously everybody wants to leave their cage, everybody would want to leave their prison. So we don't have that feeling in our heart. We don't have that feeling in our heart. So one major reason is this, that we are not ready to die because we're not ready and we're not prepared for the Day of Judgment, and we're not prepared for that meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's a second reason, is that many of us have certain attachments to this world, or certain attachments to the pleasures of this world. And obviously death is, what is called inqita. Death severs us off, right? Death cuts us off irrevocably from this world, the life of the world, our pleasures in the world, our attainments in the world, our accomplishments in the world, the people we know in the world. Now, if you look around, obviously, because nobody can control their time and manner and death, there are many people in this world who die in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and don't reach their 60s and 70s. Generally, not just because of the current situation, but also because of the current situation. And so maybe, given the current situation as Muslims, we should look into this more. What is our teaching of, what does our deen teach us about death and dying? And what is our attitude towards death and dying? So one way the ulama also used to mention this, they would talk about dhikrul maut, tadhkiratul maut, that we should make more mention of death. Whether we read more about it, or reflect on the verses in Quran about it, reflect and study the hadith about it, or even talk about it amongst one another, or make it the subject of nasiha as I'm doing today. That's tadhkiratul maut. And dhikrul maut means that we should our own remember. And some mashayikh, they used to teach a muraqabah called muraqabah maut, that a person should, close their eyes and imagine that they're dying. So imagine that they're dead, right? And then imagine that somebody is coming and they're going to do ghusl of your body, and then your body's being put on the stretcher, and then now you're being wrapped in your kafan and your burial shroud, and now the stretcher is being lifted, and now you've been taken to the graveyard. Now you're being lowered into graveyard. Okay, people are pouring earth upon you. Okay, few of your dear near ones are reciting some Quran al-Kareem, making dua for you. But then one by one, I missed the Salatul Janazah, and then one by one, each of them is leaving, and then now you're alone in your grave. And you will be alone in your grave for decades, for centuries. Allahu Alam. So this is dhikrul maut, to actually think about death, to remember death. You know, it was so much, and this may sound extreme to some people, but some mashayikh themselves, they used to tell their students, okay, dig a grave. They used to keep some graves freshly dug in the cemetery. And they said, just lower me there. Or some people would spend the night, right? Can you imagine this Salah like a sleepover? Sleepover in the grave in the cemetery. Allahu Akbar Kabira. I mean, those were intense people. They were intensely, what were they after? They really wanted this feeling of understanding death, remembering death, being prepared for death. And they were honest with themselves. And I've said this many times, these two terms, they were self-aware and self-critical. And they deeply desired this feeling that they could tell from, alhamdulillah, mashallah, their knowledge of Quran al-Kareem, their knowledge of the hadith, their knowledge of deen, that this is a feeling in deen. That the deen can elevate the human being to a level that they're ready to die, they're prepared to die, they're yearning to die because they want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're yearning for akhirah. They're done with this world. They want to move to the next life. These are just empty words when I'm saying them. But this can be the reality of the heart of a believer. And this is one of the impacts and effects of our deen, and one of the impacts and effects of Quran al-Kareem. Allahu Akbar. So then they would go through this exercise, because they wanted this. And maybe they had it to some extent, they wanted it more. They wanted it more intensely, they wanted it more passionately. Now, one of the benefits of Tazkiratul Maut, mentioning death, and Dhikrul Maut, remembering our own death or reminding ourselves that we're going to die, it helps a person keep this world in perspective, right? And you can see so many stories of humans, whether Muslims or non-Muslim, humans all over the world who, they're diagnosed with cancer or some other illness, and the doctor tells them that they have 1 year left, 2 years left, and the imminence of their death, you see immediately that human being gets a perspective on their lives, even if they don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't believe in God, the afterlife, but they get a perspective on this life. The way they behave changes, the way they view world changes, the way they view their life and value their own lifetime changes, their relationships with people improve, right? And why was this? They were going to die anyway, everybody's going to die. But they got a little signal, right? They got a message from some doctor that, yeah, you're going to die in 1 or 2 years. Now the same thing, so understand this, the same thing that happens to that person when a doctor tells them that they have 1 or 2 years left to live, the way that changes their entire outlook on life, that same effect is supposed to happen on every believer, every mu'min, every Muslim. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Kullu nafsin za'iqatul maut, every person will taste death. In other words, if we are told that we have 50 years left to live, the effect it has on us is the same thing, the same effect it would have on someone when they are told they have 1 year left to live. This is the effect that when we remember death, it gives us perspective on this world. So then a lot of things we're attached to, we won't be attached to them anymore. A lot of the fudul, the pointless, wasteful things, right? So, I don't know, because I don't want to pick on people, but if I was to, pick some random, because everybody has their own biases, right? So let me take something like golf, right? So somebody who thinks they're going to live till 80 and they're my age, right? They're in their 40s, they might think they can play golf, right? But if that person gets told by a doctor that they only have 1 year left, well, now they're going to want to spend time with their family, now they're going to want to engage in ibadah and worship, now they're going to want to prepare for the day of judgment, and they're going to say, and if somebody tells them, well, let's go play golf, they'll look at them like you're crazy. That's just such a futile waste of time. So it's not haram, but look at the perspective changes, right? The way they value their time changes. Their concept of what is meaningful, what is worth, what is value, what is a fruitful use of my time and my existence, my very being, radically changes. That effect is what deen has on a person. That is called tazkiyah. That's purification of the heart. That is an effect that, alhamdulillah, happened to the Sahaba Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. A second effect then, so one effect is this, that it would give us general perspective on the world, on our life. Second, it will make us use our time better. Third is it will take us away from sin. Again, look at that person. If you tell them that 1 year left to live, they're not going to do any more sins. They'll immediately stop sinning entirely. Just like that, instantly, without any long effort. Oh, tell me some long zikr to cure my spiritual illnesses. Tell me some hours of zikr I can do to cure my lust and my anger and my greed and my envy and my pride. None of that. They're simply told that you're going to die in 1 year. It's instantaneous. Immediately, all attraction for sin is gone. That's called tazkiyah. This is the power of dhikr al-maut. This is the power of this lesson. This is the power of knowing and being aware of the imminence and the inescapability of death. Allahu Akbar. So look at this. Now, a person is able to leave ghafla. They're able to leave futile, heedless activity. And second, they're able to leave sin. Third effect that comes is that they increase in their a'mal saleh. They increase in their ibadat. They increase in their worship, their dhikr, their tilawah, their salah, their nawafil, their sadaqah. They increase in every worship, every act of worship, every good deed that they can. The fourth effect it has is it immediately makes them soften towards others, be forgiving of others, reconciling with others. It was all the general teachings of Islam, all the character traits, all the virtuous behavior, all comes into a person when they have this consciousness and awareness of death and dying. So that was actually a major aspect of tazkiyah. Now in Quran al-Kareem, the first major way in which death and dying is mentioned is so that people believe in the resurrection, right? In life after death, and the day of judgment, that the next life, a hereafter, and an akhirah. So then another effect then of remembering death is it automatically means that you remember the akhirah, or you're focused on the akhirah. So once you're it just go back to the bridge metaphor, right? If a person's not even aware of the bridge, it means it's not even on their consciousness what's on the other side of the bridge. Their entire shu'ur, their entire awareness and consciousness is focused on where they are on that piece of land, if you will, that is on this side of the bridge. In other words, al-hayat dunya, the life of this world. But if they become aware of the bridge, if they become conscious of the bridge, if the bridge is mentioned to them, tadhkiratul maut, if they themselves remind themselves and remember and reflect about the bridge, dhikrul maut, then the necessary consequence of that is they will start focusing on what's on the other side of the bridge, because they're going to be crossing that bridge. And that is a bridge that everyone has to cross, and from which there is no return. And that is a bridge that when you cross it, on the other side, you will live forever, for all of eternity. And on this side, it's anywhere from 0 to 100 years, right? So one major benefit then of remembering death is that a person focuses more on the akhirah. A person focuses more on the hereafter. That itself has many benefits. So I have a bit more time, let me go ahead and do that. Dhikr al-akhirah. Sometimes that can also give you a lot of sukoon and itminan in your heart. If you understand akhirah in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained it in the Quran al-Kareem. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu yad'u ila daris salam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting you, is calling you to the abode of everlasting peace. So then a person views this whole life just, I'm in a waiting room. I'm just in the waiting room, and Allah Ta'ala is going to call me to the abode of everlasting peace. So it helps a person, deal with issues in this world. It gives them a greater hope. They say in English, light at the end of the tunnel. But if the concept of akhirah is eternal Jannah, eternal bliss and happiness and pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forever, if a person can try their best to make tawbah and try their best to have taqwa, and ultimately this will be decided based on the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it gives a person great hope, it gives a person great sukoon, it gives a person great contentment. And the second aspect, obviously, of akhirah that a person will reflect on is the other possibility, which is absolutely terrifying and more scary than anything that can happen to a person in this world, more terrifying than any problems or predicaments that a person may have in this world. And what is that? Is reflecting on Jahannam, on an-nar, on the fire, on hell. That what if that is my outcome? And then the worry about that would obliterate any and all other worries. So in a sense, that also gives a person sukoon and itminan, in the sense that it removes the anxiety and worries, anxiety caused by the worldly worries, by replacing it with a greater worry, that lest I end up in a state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy does not come upon me on the day of judgment, and what if I end up in the punishment of the fire of hell. And interestingly, the connection to all this, to the month of Ramadan, it comes in hadith that it was the Sunnah practice of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam to make a lot of dua for Jannah, and to make a lot of dua that Allah Ta'ala rescue and protect from the fire of Jahannam. So to make a lot of dua in this month, that may Allah Ta'ala admit all of us and all of the mu'mineen and mu'minat and muslimin and muslimat into Jannah, into Jannat al-Firdaus, and Allahumma ajirna min an-nar, that may Allah Ta'ala deliver us and rescue us and emancipate us and protect us from the fire of hell. And these are du'as, and we should make a lot. And making these du'as repeatedly, repetitively, regularly, but also with reflection on their meaning, with pondering, can help a person a lot in remembering the akhirah, focusing on the hereafter, and remembering and preparing for death. And so what we began with today's talk was that to make sure that we don't have any aversion to death, we shouldn't be scared of death and dying, and we shouldn't flee from death and dying. And that itself is a very difficult thing to do, because our emotional, psychological self naturally is afraid of these things. And it's really a reflection on the power of deen and the power of Islam. But if it enters a person's heart truly, it's not just about purification, but it transforms that person's heart, such that that human being's considerations and concerns are so different from me and you. It's like a totally different type of humanity. The true mu'mineen, the muttaqeen mu'mineen, the salihin mu'mineen, we make dua that Allah Ta'ala grant us a drop of that, a shade of that, or Allah Ta'ala out of His infinite karam and fazl, that Allah Ta'ala grant us an abundance of that. May Allah Ta'ala transform our hearts entirely, completely, and drown us entirely in the teachings and feelings of deen. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.